Welcome back to Following Know It On, a Stormlight podcast. This week is episode 48, and we're not reading a Stormlight book. So this will be the first episode where we are, spoiler alert, we're not on Roshar. I hate to break it to you if you're trying to read between the lines and wonder where we were. We're not on Roshar. This is not, by all definitions, a Stormlight book. It is, however, a Cosmere book. Do you guys know what that means?
No. Yes. Actually, yes, I think so. I'm just taking it as Roshar is our either planet or continent of the known world of everything we've seen so far. And I'm taking the Cosmere as like the universe. Maybe we're on a different planet.
Okay.
And they don't know about each other, but maybe the larger figures in our like the gods or something in our story, is my guess.
Okay.
Yep. Same. I think we got a mention, at least one, of the word Cosmere. I think Yasna says it somewhere in like Words of Radiance, I think. But yeah, and it seemed to be replacing the word like universe or everything. So that's my guess there. But yeah, here in the book Warbreaker, definitely seems like we're somewhere else.
We are somewhere else. So I'm not going to ask you guys for 2 words because we are going to be going at a faster pace through Warbreaker and asking you guys to try to summarize and in-depth stuff. This is going to be way more surface level than we're doing with Stormlight. We're going to be reading it so you guys have the context as we go back into Oathbringer in a couple weeks here. So with that in mind, I will throw to our intro before we go to our spell check, which will be very fun for me. See you guys in a second.
Wow.
All right, episode 48 of Following Know It On. We have prologue through chapter 10 of Warbreaker. And before we get into our spell check, I want each of you 30-second synopsis, first impressions on Warbreaker.
I'll jump in. Very different. I was expecting different, so I wasn't too surprised, but yeah, not 100% sure what's going on. And we've got some other like magic systems going on or something else is happening. And I'm going quickly, so I'm not taking the time to, sit down and try and figure it out. So I'm a little confused, honestly, these first few chapters, but some intriguing characters and some very different things going on. Yeah.
My synopsis is our story's like a similar story, different font. Like it's instead of Stormlight, we have breath. There's weird things with hair we'll talk about. So yeah, it's like something that would be on Roshar almost. It seems way more like a monarchy, like more political drama. But similar-ish. Like I could see it being in the same universe. But yeah, different magic system, but like similar idea to it almost. So
All right. Before we get too involved with what on earth is happening in Warbreaker and why we're reading it, we have a spell check, which we haven't done one of these in a little bit because we've been reading a lot of repeat names and repeat characters in our Stormlight books. But we get a whole brand new vocab for Warbreaker. Our first one. Who do I make go first here? Eliot? I make Eliot go first.
Yeah, I have to go first.
So our first one is the eldest daughter introduced to us. She's the eldest princess. She's the one that's supposed to be going to Hallandren, but she's not. How would you like to say this name?
I think this one is going to be the easiest one. This one has got to be Vivenna.
Okay. Vivenna, you are correct. And Paul, would you like to spell Vivenna?
I would. I went pretty simple with it as well. I went with Vivenna.
Correct.
Bingo.
You're correct.
Debated
And
between 1 and 2 ends.
I'm sure you guys don't remember this, but on our first Stormlight trivia quiz video we did, Vivenna was one of our multiple choice questions that were not correct, but just a fun Easter egg for those who have read Cosmere and know what was happening back then. I threw that in there. All right, second one is our second main character ish. If Vivenna's our first, well, I guess it depends on how you're looking at this, but the third daughter of the Idris royal family, and she has a full name, which Eliot pointed out to me that I forgot, but I will just be asking for the nickname. Her full name, well, I'll let you go first. Give me the nickname, and then I'll talk about the full name here in a second.
So I think the name we usually call her by is going to be Siri. Is it as simple as that?
It is as simple as that. Talk to your iPhone there, Paul. It's just Siri.
Hi Siri. I didn't do anything, but I tried to talk. Anyways, so yes, Siri. I debated on if this was actually just the same as like the Apple Siri virtual assistant, or if this was different. So I actually went different. I just went Ciri instead of Siri.
You're incorrect. It is S.
Okay.
Her full name is Cicerina, and that's spelled Sisinah. Cicerina, but she just goes by Siri. And we have one more spell check to round us out. I would like to know, Eliot, how you would pronounce the capital of Hallandren, the capital city where the Court of Gods is in Hallandren.
I'm most nervous for this one, but I'm more nervous for Paul on this one. That's all I'll say. I stumbled on this one. I guess in my brain I was pronouncing this as Tatelier. That's my honest shot at it.
Paul, you want to correct him?
Yeah, you're really close. It's like Tatelier.
Okay.
Teller.
Mm-hmm.
Similar, close to that, roughly. And to spell it, I may be off, but we'll just give it what I had. So I had Titellier.
Wow, you threw a lot of.
I did. I did.
A lot of letters in there. It is T apostrophe Teller. Teller.
Okay.
Every time I couldn't resist not putting that one in there. Shout out to Numuhuku Makiyaki Ayalunamore.
True. I never know whenever it's like the like it's Tatelier. I was like, what vowel is that first? So that could be an A, E, or I, or U. Like it could be any of them. So apostrophe makes sense.
It's just no vowel. It's just drops it.
Fun. Thanks, Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah.
Love it. I love it here.
Alrighty. So you guys don't know why we're reading this book. We're through to chapter 10, and I told you that it would be obvious why we're reading this book by the prologue. Do either of you have any guesses, purely based on the prologue, why we're reading Warbreaker? There's something very specific, and I'm just wondering if you guys catch it.
There are two thoughts I have. Okay, I believe this is in the prologue. If not, I apologize. My guess is with the sword we see.
Okay.
My guess is that it is the same sword, perhaps, that Zeth now has, and that is the only thing I could think of as being our relevant. Like that's the only thing I could really grasp as similar, honestly.
Okay. Elliot?
Same. The description of the sword seems similar. It's described. I didn't take super heavy notes for this, but I think it's described as having a black blade
It is.
in this, which is the same as that sword that Zeth just got at the end of Words of Radiance. Also of note, so this sword speaks, right? And Paul, you don't have the benefit of this, but the way it's stylized in the book is the same, and that way is different than like how Syl speaks. When Syl speaks to Kaladin, a lot of the time it's actually words, like in text. Not always. Now I'm double guessing myself, but in this one, it's just like italics, like it's thoughts, being passed instead of actually words. That's the same way it was shown at the end of Words of Radiance when the sword like spoke to Zeth. It was as if it was just like thoughts and not necessarily words. So that on top of the black sword makes me think maybe it's the same.
I can see that. One thing that really I had to stop and think about for a second here. So this is the first time I've listened to an audiobook that wasn't like Michael Kramer or his wife Kate
Reading.
Yes. And I remembered a very distinct voice that was given to Zeth's sword at the end of Words of Radiance, and it was very proper and like, "Hello, would you mind if we do some killing today?" Like very proper, kind of funny. Same vein as "Stretch forth thy hand."
Yeah.
Attitude. And this, it was a different reader, but I felt like it was going for the same style. Like if you told two different people, like this is how this sword would talk, and they both attempted it, I could see that being very similar, but it wasn't the same, and that was just because it was two different readers doing it. But I'm kind of jumping to the conclusion that that's our sword buddy here.
Okay. All right. Surrounding the rest of the prologue, good guesses, gentlemen. Did either of you have any other guesses before I jump forward on why we're reading this?
My only other guess is that this could be related to Hoyd with hair, which we'll kind of talk about more.
Okay.
That's the only thing I could think of.
I feel like that's going to be. We have not read a lot of Cosmere, but I'm getting the impression that that's maybe a safe assumption a lot of the time, that somehow it has something to do with Hoyd. He seems like a rather linchpin kind of character. So I was kind of coming into this book looking for Hoyd. He felt like a character I would expect to see in another world. So yeah, I'm with you, Paul.
There's going to be a following note on episode in the future. You can mark my words, listeners, you too, where I will give you a Cosmere crash course of stuff that's on the wiki without you having to go on the wiki. That's like not necessarily spoilers, but it's just stuff that Brandon Sanderson's talked about in live streams and stuff. But I can't do it yet. It will come, and it'll probably come before the end of us reading Stormlight, like before Rhythm of War. It'll probably come before then, but it can't come quite yet. And I'll tell you, like, what's happening in the Cosmere. But as far as the prologue of Warbreaker goes, we have the Dark Sword. We have Vasher. We're introduced to a character named Vasher. And I don't know about you guys, but on my first read of Warbreaker, he seemed very Aragorn-esque to me, like rough around the edges, like Strider sitting in the corner type character. He's got this sword that he knows what he's doing. If they steal his sword, he doesn't care, that type of thing. I just picture a Strider-esque character when I think of Vasher. We have breaths, which is this magic system that we're introduced right off the bat. And what were you guys' thoughts on breaths? Do you guys know how, like, through chapter 10, do you understand? Are you understanding? Wow, are you understanding how breaths are working? Do you have any questions on like what the system is here?
So, I guess let me take a shot at it, and you can tell me how wrong I am.
Okay.
From what I picked up so far, we have these things called breaths, which everyone is born with like one of them. At least normal people are born with one breath. And a breath is kind of like a soul in some ways, but you can lose your breath and not die, because we see the god guide light song, take the breath from this young child. She doesn't die, but now she's like lost some of herself or whatever it is. So you can take more breaths into yourself, and as you gain more of them, it like heightens all your senses, is kind of the way I'm getting it. And he uses that phrase too, heightenings. So you achieve these different levels of heightenings, and when you have a certain number of breaths and you achieve a certain heightening, it gives you like special abilities. You can see or recognize the trueness of a color where normal people can't, and you can hear like the pureness of a tone of a sound of music or something that other people can't. And it seems to give you like power. So we see in the prologue him use this awakening power to control inanimate objects. And the formula I kind of picked up on was he's got to have breath he has to like impart the breath onto the inanimate object. He has to have color in order to do this. And then he has to like speak a command. So color plus breath plus command gets you an awakening. Am I on the right track?
You are. And yeah, as you get more breaths, you kind of level up, if you will, and there's different heightenings. I believe I could be wrong, but 50 is sticking in my head for the music one. If you have 50, then you attain perfect pitch, which is something that they talk about very briefly. Which, with that in mind, I want to read something from Words of Radiance, which we just finished. Let me read something real quick. How did you get in? Kaladin asked. Well, there are these things called doors, Wit replied. The guards let you in? Technically, Wit asked. Yes. Kaladin sat back down on the bench of his cell. Wit wore his black on black, his thin silver sword undone from his waist and sitting on the bench beside him. A brown sack slumped there as well. Wit leaned down to tune his instrument, one leg crossed over the other. He hummed softly to himself and nodded. Perfect pitch, Wit said. Makes this all so much easier than it once was.
Thanks.
No problem.
I immediately thought of Wit as well when we started talking about music and pitches, because he's been our instrument guy. He's had that instrument more than once. He had that flute that I actually, because I was just going through all my notes from Words of Radiance, because we just did our summary episode on that, I actually came across another quote that I thought was interesting as well. It's now I'm not 100% sure who he's talking to. Oh no, it's in the same chapter, I think, as what you just read. Later on, he says, all people are musicians, Wit countered. The question is whether or not they share their songs. And I don't know how or if that's even related. It just kind of struck me as Wit seems to be attuned to music maybe more than others are. So seeing some similarities already.
Trying to find another tidbit quote here, but I can't find it quite yet. I'll find it here in a second. Paul, did you have any thoughts on heightenings and breaths and etc.?
Yes, I was going to say, while you're looking, if you want to keep looking for your quote, I can talk about it a little bit. I didn't think about it that linearly. I really like that Eliot kind of brought up the whole like color plus breath plus command is what makes like an awakening, is kind of, I don't know, I almost think of it like a lashing for our terms. So basically, the way I'm thinking of breaths is like the equivalent of Stormlight in our books, just like a little different. I still don't get if it's like if we're talking about like a thing that's a breath, because I feel like it's talked about almost like currency also. So that's why I'm kind of equating it to our spheres with Stormlight. I don't know if that doesn't fully match it, but similar vein. Um,
I agree with you. It is a little similar in that the like source of power is also a sort of currency, or you can sell it. I think there's a couple mentions there to like you could get a lot of money for those breaths, or kind of thing like that.
Towards
No,
the
for
end,
sure.
in chapter 9 or 10, that's what convinces Vivenna to take the breaths, is that it could help Ciri and she could use it to, sell or whatever. And she could use it to, even though she thinks taking breaths is morally wrong, or I guess we get the assumption, but she takes it anyway because it could help Ciri.
True. And kind of, I guess, what I'm using to back up my thoughts of this just being this particular world's Stormlight. I'm gonna compare this briefly with it without spoiling to Mistborn. So I haven't read much of Mistborn, but I'm a little bit into the first book of the Mistborn series. But in there, it's shown to you pretty quick that I guess their magic system is through metals. Like different metals can basically produce different things, like different powers, almost like our surges in our Knights Radiant in the Way of Kings. And so I'm kind of thinking of breaths as just another place in the Cosmere, and they use breaths instead of Stormlight or metal or like things like that. And so I'm kind of just imagining each place has a magic system that's similar like this. Like you either absorb or consume something, metal or light or breath, or
Color.
color. Yeah. And they're kind of used for whatever powers, currency, things like that. There, it's just a different thing in each place.
Yeah.
So that's my understanding of breath so far.
Jumping back a little bit, I found what I wanted to read. Keeping in mind the sword, and Eliot, you were saying having it talk, like, but it's not dialogue. It's kind of just like a thought, is how it reads on the page. So this is also in Words of Radiance. This is an interlude. The interlude is titled Xyle. If you remember this interlude, Kaladin just got beat up by Szeth and comes to Xyle crying, and he wants to be trained. Very, very last couple lines of this interlude. Just leave your attitude and come to learn. I hate beating up people that are younger than me. It makes me feel like a bully. The kid grunted, sliding the door shut. Xyle pulled up his blanket. Darn monks only got one, and turned over on his cot. He expected a voice to speak in his mind as he drifted off. Of course, there wasn't one. Hadn't been one in years.
Curious that you're bringing that up now. I noticed that when we read that, and I wrote I wrote in my notes. I don't think we talked about it, but I wrote in my notes that I guessed a very different direction with that voice. I almost thought of him as like ex Surgebinder. What did he used to have a Spren who he's used to talking?
I think we did talk about that on the podcast.
Did we?
I think we did.
We might have. That was my guess, was that he had a Spren friend, familiar, whatever you want to call it, and no longer did, and so he's missing that companion. So now that you're pointing that out now, has me intrigued.
Mm-hmm. Could just be completely random. I could just be, reading excerpts from Words of Radiance for no reason, but
I'm gonna go with that one. Yeah, I think you're just pulling our leg, Yeah.
All right, quick summary of the plot so far in Warbreaker synopsis real quick. So Hallandren and Idris are both kingdoms, and they're on the brink of war, sort of. Hallandren can't get their act together enough to actually declare war, because they're just all talking about politics and colors and breaths and all that fun stuff. But Idris is certainly really scared of Hallandren, and Hallandren isn't very scared of Idris. So Idris sends or promises their princess to marry the God King of Hallandren. But when it comes to it, Idris King guy, I don't remember his name, Vivenna and Ciri's father, he doesn't want to send Vivenna because I don't know if we're given a reason, really. We're seeing a lot of this from Ciri's perspective, and Ciri isn't told why she's going. So we don't really know why Vivenna isn't going, but at last second change, Ciri's going instead. And Ciri's, 17, I think? And terrified, out of her mind. Vivenna's, I believe, 22 at this time, and she's been prepared. She's more of an adult. She should know more of what's happening here. Last second swap, Ciri goes instead. Vivenna is not happy about it and follows Ciri to try to help her. So she's in Hallandren by the end of these chapters incognito, as not a princess of Idris. And we've got some other characters. We've got Lightsong, we've got Vasher, but the majority of the time we've spent so far is with Vivenna and Ciri. So just kind of a tone difference between Stormlight and Warbreaker. It's very like royal wedding prep. There's like 4 or 5 chapters talking about Ciri and her wedding with the God King so far. What are your guys' thoughts on this? Paul, did it make you uncomfortable? You don't like those
It did make me uncomfortable. Not in the sense that throwback to when we talked about Dalinar and Navani being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Not in the same way. This just feels like very forced, like uncomfortable, like arranged marriage.
Right.
And it's just not pleasant to think about. And so I just don't enjoy that. Is why I felt uneasy about it. The way it has progressed so far, so we're at chapter 10. The way it's progressed so far is like fine. And we're kind of, I feel like we're kind of tip of the iceberg. We're kind of setting the scene, getting into our environment here with Ciri and this place that she is, kind of just testing the waters. So nothing crazy has happened. But as far as like setting the premise of our story, it's kind of been uncomfortable. I haven't been the biggest fan of it.
Me neither. Very, like, I'm not a big fan of Warbreaker.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say it now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm with you. The very, very different style of story, both in just like I think you mentioned this, Paul, like political drama as opposed to action or just we're diving into the nuances of court life and the politics there and the relationships there, and it's all about who's wearing what on what day of the week, and all of that kind of stuff, which doesn't immediately jump out as interesting to me. Plus then all of kind of the sexual side of a lot of this is interesting, and that I'm not sure where we're going with it. Like I'm not sure kind of what's gonna happen here, and it's it actually, now is probably a good time to bring in, it draws some interesting comparisons in my mind, albeit we've just started the story, so I'll need to read more to make an actual comparison. But it actually seems a little similar to the Greek myth of Cupid and Psyche, which if you're not familiar with it, you can Google that and look that up. That myth was also retold by C.S. Lewis in his book Till We Have Faces, which is like his own fictional version of that myth. But in that myth, Psyche is a younger sister who is married to against her will, married to this thing that everyone thinks is a beast, but actually is the beautiful god Cupid. And she's not cute. Psyche is not allowed to see Cupid. She's at the anytime she ever encounters him, all the lights have to be off. And the way the myth goes is she eventually gets curious enough that she brings a lantern in with her one day and she sees Cupid, but then that awakens Cupid and she no longer is able to be married to him, and he leaves. A little more nuanced and detailed than that, but some parallels being drawn there already from this story. I'm curious to see where this is going to go, to see if this does kind of follow that Greek myth in a way, but obviously we need to know what's going to happen next.
No, definitely. I can definitely see a comparison to that already, and why you would note that. Because we haven't really seen the God King yet, as far as I know. And we're kind of Sirius kind of faked that she's seen the God King. I don't know. It's been a whole deal, but yeah, he's just kind of this strange figure that's apparently horrible, and we'll just kind of have to get further before we can analyze him, I guess.
I'm very much waiting for kind of the other foot to drop. It seems like the story so far has been weird in a sense that it's all new stuff to us, right? It's a new magic systems, it's a new world, new cultures, but it's all been very kind of okay, yeah, okay, yeah, okay, yeah. I'm waiting for the oh, but here's the twist. And it's I'm waiting for everything to not be what it seems. I'm
Right.
waiting for something's going to happen. It's like, oh, wait, everyone thinks this is true, but actually it's this. And I'm pretty sure that's going to happen at some point. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have a story. If this is just going to kind of plod on predictably, that it wouldn't be much of a story. So I'm waiting to see when and what our twist is going to be, because I don't feel like we've gotten it yet.
We mentioned it a little bit ago, but we can dive into it more as we think about this. But hair is a interesting dynamic here. Siri has the ability to grow her hair and change its color on command. She has to like kind of sit there and focus to grow it, but her hair color changes with her emotion, and it's seen as like something proper if you can control your hair. So Vivenna, like her hair never changes and she's always in control of her emotions, but Siri can never control her hair because she's not mature or whatever. So I'll let you guys talk about what you have in the outline and what you kind of already mentioned with your similarities to Stormlight. But what were your guys' thoughts on hair as a magic system?
But before we start guessing, question is, did I read it correctly that the hair color changes is unique to the royal bloodline? It seemed like that was kind of hinted at.
I believe so. I don't know off the top of my head. I think so.
It seemed like because when Vivenna comes to the town in like the last couple chapters, she's trying hard to hide the fact that her hair is changing colors.
It's definitely unique to Idris. I think it is like more pronounced in the royal family. I believe you are correct. Yes.
Okay.
I was under the impression that it may have been like their racial, if you originate from Idris, that was like a thing. But yeah, it may just be the royal family. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's at least like kind of a local thing, I believe.
So then, yeah, that spins off some questions. I did think about, trying to think back to Stormlight Archive. Wit, or Hoyd, our good friend. We've talked about this before, I think. It's been a little while, but Wit is often described with dark hair, like black hair, but I think at least once or twice is described, or perhaps we're kind of guessing a character is related to him that has white hair. And so that immediately gets me wondering, is this the same like power or ability? Does Wit have this ability? Does his hair change with his emotions, or can he change it? And is he just really good at controlling it and normally has, the dark hair? This could be going out on a limb, but that's where my mind was going.
I don't think it is going out on too much of a limb. I can't think of any other, at least from what we've seen, we have no other explanation. So I'm jumping to the conclusion that he's, I don't know if you can learn this, or I'm under the assumption that he's from here. Tentatively with what the information we have, that he's from Idris, um, at least. And yeah, like my understanding is that you can control it, um, for the very most part. So maybe he, has appeared to some people with his dark hair like normal, and some people with white hair. So
Paul, you made a very interesting comparison, kind of on accident. Maybe 2-3 weeks ago in our podcast, you compared Zyle and Hoyd. And you said that Hoyd was the guy who wants to give you advice, and he'll go out of your way, or he'll go out of his way to get in your face and give you advice. And Zyle was the complete opposite of, he'll give you advice, but you have to get in his face, and you have to make yourself a nuisance in order for him to give you the light of day. And those two characters are what I just read excerpts from in Words of Radiance. So keep that in mind.
sick. Look at me go.
Well, while we're trying to find comparisons and things to tie to Wit or Hoyd, I thought of one more. I thought back to the Wandersail chapter where Kaladin is listening to this story, right? And he thinks that he sees a bunch of images in the smoke of the fire that Wit has. That seems like it could be related to the magical powers we see in this world. That kind of being able to manipulate inanimate objects and that control of like colors and things like that. That could be an explanation of what Kaladin was seeing there in that chapter of the images. Maybe if Wit has that type of ability to maybe he was doing an awakening in that moment to make those pictures for Kaladin, or maybe it was just all in Kaladin's head. Like, who knows? But if we're trying to find comparisons to Wit, that was a potential one on the list for me.
Or maybe Wit's just light weaving and he's actually secretly a light weaver.
Also possible.
Haha. Thanks, Trevor.
No problem. All right. Just a couple other things. Lifeless. There's a whole army of lifeless in Hallandren that Ciri is greeted by, and they're kind of just there. I don't know. How would you describe these lifeless soldiers?
Yeah, I wasn't sure. It seemed like this was kind of a plot point, right? The people of Idris are told that the king has an army of lifeless and how terrible they are, and I'm getting this image of zombies raised from the dead, and then when Ciri actually sees them, they do seem like they're potentially dead. It looks like they don't breathe, like they don't have any life in them, but they're not like creepy, decrepit zombies. They're just kind of grayed out humans, basically.
That's kind of the image I had, was like basically a human, but just like pale white, like,
Yeah.
completely standard, like lifeless person. Not really alive in a sense, just very blank slate.
Doesn't she compare them to statues? Doesn't
Yeah,
she
she
say
does.
that they're like so still and so gray they just kind of look like statues?
Yep. I don't know why, but this whole scene of her arriving in Hallandren and there's this black and white army off to her side, and then over here there's this huge colorful city, and it's more pomp and circumstance than she's ever seen. I get very Alice in Wonderland vibes here. I don't know what it is about it, but like over here there's just rainbow colors, and over here there's, you know, the Queen of Hearts army who's just standing there. You know, I don't know. That's what I think of.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I get it. Definitely.
Yeah, it's definitely just such a stark contrast. I don't fully know what to make of it yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, kind of like we said, I feel like we're kind of setting the stage right now. Speaking of, I guess, setting our stage, I feel like my only notable question about our book so far is our prologue character Vasher.
Yeah.
I could be way off. He's been in our other chapters at points, hasn't he?
He was in chapter 4, maybe 5.
Okay.
And he was kind of just sitting there. He didn't really do anything.
Fun and exciting. Yeah, I don't fully know what he's gonna do. I don't know. I kind of just get he's gonna be like our hero. I almost think of him like, if we're comparing to Stormlight, like him like Kaladin and Vivenna like Shallan almost. I feel like they're gonna be the parallel protagonists that don't meet or something. But fully speculating there.
Yeah, Trevor, you were alluding to this at the beginning. Vasher, like, you can't quite tell whether he's good guy or bad guy at this point. Is this the hero here to overthrow the oppressive government, or is this the Zeth character here to assassinate someone we like?
Right.
I have no idea yet.
All right, that's kind of all I have for you guys for these first 10 chapters. Do you guys have anything to add? Any questions?
We got to at least mention this Light Song character.
Sure.
That we see a couple times. One of the gods of this nation of Halandran. He seems like an intriguing character. He's a god who doesn't believe in his own religion. At least that's the way he like describes himself.
Yeah.
And the perspective we get from him is interesting. We learn a lot about daily life, I guess, in Halandran and who these gods are, and the incredible excess and I don't even know how to describe, opulence that they live in is interesting. But he seems to be a fairly reasonable guy. Like, he doesn't seem like he's there to take advantage of the world and just get back massages all day or whatever it is that they do. I'm interested to see how he's going to become a factor in our story with Vasher and Ciri and Vivenna.
I agree. My only final thought is actually really I want to hear if Eliot has a prediction. With our God King character, which we haven't actually seen, but I think he's just been alluded to as our, I don't know, antagonist almost, or looming weird threat, in a way, because he's just noted as being whole deal about the God King. Like, do we think he's gonna be kind of like the story of Cupid and Psyche, where he's like a nice guy, like, but you can't see him or things like that, or is it gonna be cruel, or like, I don't know where to go with it personally. I was curious if you had a guess.
Yeah, I don't know what to guess at this point. This whole intro, these first 10 chapters, has been very disorienting in a way. I almost feel like, Ciri or Vivenna, who's been thrust into a world that's just overwhelming. Like, wait, what? Huh? What's going on? So I don't know that I have enough wits about me yet to try and predict, but I do wonder if the twist that's got to come at some point might be, maybe this guy isn't the nasty creature everyone claims he is, and maybe he's a prisoner of his own religion, or maybe he's, trapped in this role that he has of the God King. Maybe he didn't choose this. I think that's even probably hinted out there that he didn't necessarily choose this. He was just kind of reborn or whatever, returned into it. But maybe he wants to get out just as much as anybody else does, and he's trapped and can't get out, or I don't know. Yeah, I'm very curious to see if this is going to parallel Cupid and Psyche more, if there's going to be more parallels to draw that, because that was what immediately jumped into my mind as I was reading some of this, and with the whole Ciri being offered to the king as a bride is very similar to that myth of Cupid and Psyche.
Alrighty.
Okay.
Let's read more and find out in Warbreaker. Any closing thoughts before I wrap us up?
No.
Yeah, gotta read more.
All right, let's do it. Thanks for joining me, Paul and Eliot, for our first episode of Warbreaker.
See ya.
Certainly.